Hi, you're watching Address tutorial to successful communication. And today I would like to talk about someone really special, one of my heroes. And the reason why I would like to talk about her because it's Women's History Month, and I would like to talk about her because she is absolutely exceptional. So the lady who I'm going to talk about is Vilma Hugonnai, the first medical doctor of Hungary. Now, I drew this picture of her because she is quite of my hero. I know it doesn't look like her, but I do pop art, so it looks a bit different. And I would like to introduce her. So she was born as an aristocrat, the daughter of a count. His father received the title in 1822. She studied in the only way to get higher education as a woman could at that time in the Educational Institute run by Prepstel, Maria Prepstel, and that was a boarding school. And she finished quite young. She got married very, very young. She was just about to be 18 when she married György Szilassi, and they had 3 children. However, how to put it gently, her husband weren't exactly an intellectual person, and she was a very, very intellectual person, so obviously the marriage didn't quite work. So she spent her time pretty much with studying nature and writing down her studies. In 1868, she read in an article in a paper that in Zurich, women are becoming medical doctors. And she became quite fascinated, and eventually her husband signed a permission, because back then that was needed, so she could go and study. However, financially, he refused to support her through university. She lived in quite deep poverty during her studies, and she ended up having a diet, what we would call now vegan. She was eating raw fruit and vegetables and bread, and she lived on that one for quite a long time during her studies, which is quite remarkable considering that she was born with a silver spoon in her mouth. And from there, being like a really, really rich, influential woman, she decided to be a medical student, a poor medical student living on fruit and vegetable. And she graduated in 1879, and she was offered many positions in Zurich, but she decided she's going to go back to Hungary, and she returned in 1880, where there was quite a nasty surprise for her because the degree was not recognized by the Hungarian government. Her degree was not recognized for a woman because back then in 1880, Hungarian society thought that women are not for education and women should not be educated. So, what did she do? Did she give up? No, hell no. She became a midwife. Now, back then, for an aristocrat, that was a very, very shocking thing to do. I mean, she had a title, she was a count, and she was helping farmer people and very, very poor people, people in poverty, mainly women, to, well, really practicing as a doctor, but mainly about women's health issues, so pregnancy and things like that, because she was protecting herself with her midwife title. Now, the family didn't really like the fact that they have a relative who is practicing as a midwife, and she was getting quite a big pressure to stop her practice, but she didn't because she was passionate about her profession. She divorced her husband because they weren't very happy, and she met Vince Arthur, and they got married in 1887. Now, he was an academic as well, so this was a way better marriage, and they soon had a daughter. Now, her husband asked her to stop practicing as a midwife because, like I said, being a midwife was something what was frowned upon. Obviously, nowadays being a nurse or a midwife is a respectable job. Now, back then it wasn't. Back then that was something what they frowned upon, and he didn't want his wife to be a midwife. However, he supported her to to get her degree fully recognized and to practice as a doctor. She carried on studying and write quite a lot of books about women's education. She helped to set up grammar schools for girls. They were the very first grammar schools in Hungary, and they were kind of like the highest education for women back then. She was a member of the National Education for Women group, where she was teaching care of the ill, care of children, child protection, and treating infections. Now, I think at this point it is quite easy to say that she was way above her time. I mean, like we're talking about somebody nowadays, pretty much. And she lived more than 100 years ago. In 1895, law finally permitted that women enter to higher education. Therefore, in 1897, on 14th of May, she finally was awarded with a medical doctor position for the second time, and she was recognized as a doctor. And with that step, she didn't just become the first doctor of Hungary, she opened the way for girls to higher education. She was the first one, and after that, it became normal that women going to university and women becoming doctors. In 1899, she criticized the government in the press regarding education for women. She repeated it in 1907, where she was criticizing again the government attitude towards women education. Now, this is the best. This is how kick-ass she was. At age 67, in 1914, she took part in a soldier medic training and encouraged females to contribute towards the war effort, and influenced many nurses and doctors to volunteer to the Red Cross. Because of her influence, 84 female doctors volunteered to the Red Cross in the First World War. Now, I know that Hungary was kind of the losing side of the First World War, but that does not make her achievement any worse, because this lady stood for women education, and she was passionate about healing, passionate about teaching. Oh, sorry. All of these 85 women also, they all qualified and was able to qualify because Vilma opened the door for them. She's not just somebody who became the first doctor of Hungary. She was the one who opened education for us. Without her, I wouldn't have a degree. Without her, I possibly wouldn't speak English. Without her, I possibly wouldn't live in England. Without her, I possibly would be nobody, because I wouldn't have a chance to have a higher education. So, Vilma Hugonnai, thank you very much. You are kick-ass.